Is it Pallavi?
Pallavi.
Okay.
Pallavi is like lullaby.
Is it Pallavi?
No, it's Pallavi, so the A's are silent and the L is beyond it.
Pallavi. Okay, we are live. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the Seeds of Perpetuity album release and panel. My name is Rachel Adams. I'm the Chief Curator and Director of Programs at the Bemis Center. Thank you so much for joining us. I am going to share some images real quick and get started. Sorry, it's not on the right slide. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you again for coming. I hope you can all see these slides. As I mentioned, I'm Rachel Adams. I'm Chief Curator and Director of Programs at the Bemis Center located in Omaha, Nebraska. And just before we get started and turn everything over to the panelists, I just want to run through a few things that that's kind of coming up at Bemis. And then I will turn it over to Eric. So first, after this week, we have next week a virtual at Low End with Pamela Z, which is Thursday, May 6th at 8. So please join us for that. We will send out the link for that in the next few days, and people can join in. We'll have another virtual at Low End on May 20th with Kilimanzigo. So these are really two very exciting shows. We're super excited to bring these artists to you. So please make sure that you follow us at Bemis Center on Instagram, or sign up for our email list if you're not on it yet, and you'll get all the information about these. If you don't know what we are at Bemis, we're actually a multitude of things. We are a contemporary art space that does exhibitions, public programs, and residency program. And right now we have an open call for applications for our 2022 curator in residence. So if you are an independent emerging curator out there and you're interested in coming to Omaha and living with us for about a year and a half, check out our application, and you can apply for that opportunity. You'll be able to have a live workspace at Bemis. You'll be paid a monthly stipend. There'll be studio visits that we'll pay you to do, and then also curate a project at the end of it. So it's a really great opportunity. And this will be the fourth curator in residence that we've had at Bemis. So if you're interested, please check that out on our website. And those are my slides for now. I'm going to stop sharing, and I just want to say a few things about this. So Eric DeLuca is actually a Bemis alumni. He did the residency program in 2016. Is that right, Eric? Yeah, I think so. So before my time, but I heard lots of stories about his amazing work. I'm super excited to be able to do this program with him. It's actually our 40th anniversary at Bemis this year. And so we're highlighting programs that we're doing with alumni. So very excited to bring Eric back for this program. And he is going to be joined by Pallavi Sen, Autumn Wallace, and Colbeen Hughie. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to you, Eric.
Hello. Thank you, Rachel and Bemis and audience and all of these friends here. I just want to say that my time at Bemis was really transformative. So I'm really appreciative of that space. And so it's really nice to come back tonight, even though I'm not there, but I'm kind of there. So what to do? How do we do this? Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna talk about context real quick, and then each of us, me, Koli, Pallavi, Autumn, we're gonna introduce ourselves, and we're also gonna present really quickly for like 5 minutes. We're gonna share a quote and a question, and then the last, I would say 30 minutes of this moment is gonna be us just sort of having a discussion about seeds and plants and how they work to inspire our creative practice. And I just want to say that if you have a question, put it into the YouTube chat, and those questions will be relayed to us. So I'm going to just read this, and I'll kind of annotate where necessary, and then we'll move on to these introductions. So this is the context. Seeds are imaginative vessels that open a covenant of reciprocity. And this idea of a covenant of reciprocity is something that Robin Wall Kimmerer writes about. And she's somebody that we will sort of talk about, I'm sure, throughout this evening. It's no surprise that during this past year of uncertainty, there was a blitz of planting seeds. Why is this happening? Why are people during this period of uncertainty and pandemic planting seeds and growing plants? I mean, there are many reasons for this that hopefully we can talk about, but I think, and I'm sure that Robin Wall Kimmerer thinks, that seeds are teachers. They hold knowledge for themselves and beings around them. And Robin Wall Kimmerer writes, quote, "They live both above and below ground, joining skyworld to earth. Plants know how to make food from light and water, and then they give it away. I like to imagine that when Sky Woman scattered her handful of seeds across Turtle Island, she was sowing sustenance for the body and also for the mind, emotion, and spirit. She was leaving us teachers. The plants can tell us her story. We need to learn to listen, end quote. I love this last bit too. We need to learn to listen. Cached in ever-shifting geopolitical transformation, seeds hold pathways to stories about the mess of nature and culture. Seeds are time, they use and are used. So during this moment tonight, during this conversation, we're going to reflect on how seeds inspire our critical creative process. And also in tandem, this event marks the release of Seeds of Perpetuity, which is an album that Coley and I worked on, which is a never-ending live YouTube album of music. And using machine learning and music information retrieval, a computer program categorizes a weird discography of records released in the 70s, specifically written to help plants grow healthy. And then this music is transformed into seedlings of sound that grow slowly into ambient rhizomatic textures. And the link to that album is going to be in the chat. So you can visit that anytime from now on. Okay, so that was some context, some rambly stuff. Hopefully some of these things will sort of come out in the later part of this conversation. And so now we're just going to introduce ourselves. I'm going to talk about some work and introduce myself beyond this context bit, but I just want to pass the word now so my voice isn't so present. And I'm going to pass the word to Pallavi. Hi, Pallavi.
Hi. My name is Pallavi Sen, and I am from Bombay in India. And right now I'm in Western Massachusetts, and behind me is my garden last year in Western Massachusetts. And I will pass it to Autumn.
Oh, but I think that you should do your 5-minute intro now.
Oh, you want me to do my 5-minute intro?
Yeah,
now?
you do the 5 and then you pass it to Autumn, and then Autumn will pass it to Coley, and then Coley will pass it to me.
Myself. Okay, hold on.
Or we don't have to do that. We could do like a quick round of intros.
Now, well, maybe let's do that.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, Autumn.
All right. Hello, I am Autumn Wallace, and I have the miscellaneous beautiful grass in my background. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm currently at a residency in Brooklyn called Bed-Stuy Art Reds. And I'm going to pass it to Colin.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Kolpet Huye. I'm a visual artist born in Reykjavik, Iceland, which ironically has not a lot of plants. But
there's a story behind that we should talk about later.
Yeah, the sheep. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and Eric was so kind to bring me into this project. I have been I was so lucky to get to make visuals for Eric's perpetual audio piece, and that's our garden that's running there in the back. And yeah, I guess that's it for now. I'm speaking from Berlin, and I'll pass it over to Eric again.
Okay, I'm Eric DeLuca. I'm artist and musician, and I am speaking to you from Providence, Rhode Island. And so now we move on to our introductions. Should I go first, or Pallavi, do you want to go first? Or does anybody want to go first?
Eric, go for it.
You want me to go?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, I'll go, I guess. Coley, do you want to go?
I mean, I can go. I didn't prepare very much, so maybe I'll go and get it over with.
Okay,
So, yeah, as I said, I'm a visual artist born in Reykjavik in Iceland. And I've been a visual artist for a long time, but for the past years, I've kind of been working with the future a bit. I do a variety of mediums. I do performance art, and I was mainly doing performance art for the longest time because I was so tired of doing digital stuff. But then, you know, nobody was allowed to do any stuff like that anymore. So I started doing digital stuff and video and stuff like this again, and I kind of love it again. And lately, I've been working a lot with kind of like future and science fiction scenarios. Like 3 years ago, I made kind of a series of works, of video works and performances that were kind of based around the strange scenario and ecological impact of crypto mining in Iceland. And how that affects kind of, yeah, like kind of the image building of a young nation, and how it kind of relates to colonialism in many ways. Iceland used to be, where I come from, used to be a colony kind of until 1944. And yeah, and for the past like year and a half, I've been working on a project called the Animal Internet, which I'm very excited about, which is kind of like a, yeah, eco-futuristic vision of kind of an internet. It's a vision of the internet where the animals are kind of builders and architects of the internet. And I can share the screen now. Oops, I'm learning the Zoom here. I hardly ever use it. Yeah, so here is a screenshot of the animalinternet.earth website, which has my project Animal Internet on it. And it launched on last Earth Day, April 22nd. And here's a little video I made specially for Earth Day. But here is kind of, yeah, I guess you could call it a little kind of manifesto or something about what I call a zoocratic future, which is this future in which the animals are kind of a part of our decision-making processes and technology, ecology, culture, economics, and so forth through the power of the internet. And here's a bunch of stuff that people can take a look at if they like to at the animalinternet.earth, if they want to learn about the zoocratic future of Earth and the internet. So yeah, I guess that's it for me for now.
Cool.
Oops. Yes.
I love this idea that animals are, that they become part of a decision-making process, whatever that may be. Also, remember that you also you sent us a quote earlier.
Oh yeah, the quote. Yes. We all promised to bring a quote, and I'm gonna bring up my quote here. I have to go through here. So basically, the quote was this funny quote that I bumped into on Reddit. I forgot when, but the quote is from Reddit user Ergot Poisoning. And it's this kind of like beautiful stoner thought, I guess, or something, which is like, maybe plants are really farming us, giving us oxygen until we eventually expire and turn into mulch, which they can consume. And, you know, I thought it was kind of a pretty idea about the kind of, yeah, we were discussing the other day, like how we tend to see plants as resources, like we eat them, we build from them, we do lots of things from them, but we have no idea how the plants see us. You know, maybe the plants see us as resources. It's hard to tell, but fun to ponder.
And you also had a question about love.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was thinking about you know, just to think about. Yeah, so I'll just get to the question. Like, so there's a lot of love in the world, and plants are such a huge part of our world. Like everywhere we go, almost, you know, there's plants everywhere, and there's so much of them that we kind of tend to see them as more like part of the scenery often than individuals. And so my question is, I don't know who the question is for. Maybe it's for all of us to think about. Like maybe it's fun to think about it. So I wrote, in what ways does our love of individual plants differ from our love of human individuals or animal individuals? And then like further question is like, we love plants in our own way, but have we ever felt loved by a plant? So that was my question.
Thanks, Coley. We'll come back to these ideas when we all come back together. Okay, Autumn, you want to go next? Take the mic.
Okay. Hello. I love that question, especially because I loop in a lot of plant love into my life at work. But yeah, I'm going to share my screen. Oh my, there's so many screens open. Bear with me. Oh, did it wrong. Since the share button is so big and yellow, I always choose that one first. Anyway, hello everyone. My name is Autumn Wallace. I'm a visual artist mythologizing the Black femme experience in paintings and sculptures. And my work can kind of best be described or echoed by a quote of Robin Wall Kimmerer, who we're all probably going to be quoting and discussing through this. She was talking about the taxonomy of names, talking about how Linnaeus said, oh, I'm going to give names to everything. But Indigenous people wait for the name because they have to see and live with this subject instead of the object that Linnaeus saw. And the quote itself was, who has the right to give a name? If it's an object, you can call it anything you want. But if it's a subject, you wouldn't presume. You would wait to know for the true name to be revealed. And I love that so much. So I kind of choose in my work between things seen as inanimate objects or symbols, but they are just as alive as the characters that I choose. And I got into art through science in a couple steps. I love the science of things, the science of how we see color and how pigments are made, the science of money and economics, the science of soil, water, and light that makes plants possible, et cetera, et cetera. And in getting into these things, I kept coming across these patterns of dependency and teamwork, regardless of the field, and it got me to fixate on symbiotic relationships and all the forms that they take, the parasitic, mutualistic, and communalistic relationships. Parasitic, where something takes and takes, but it never gives back. Think dodder in the West Coast that doesn't have leaves or roots, it just grows over and leaches resources out of nearby plants. Mutualistic relationships where the existence of both parties works together for the benefit of both of them, like the spotted lanternfly pictured in this On Fire, which is a Philly, a Philly thing, and the Tree of Heaven, most notably in the Tree Grows in Brooklyn books, and communalistic, where one party may be using the other. Nothing's lost on the part of the host, but they have a healthy dependency on each other, kind of like orchids and trees. And these are the relationships that I base my character narratives off of, and the inspiration for the types of plants that I've collected for over 5 years now, specifically orchids and other epiphytes that just glom onto trees and never let go. And I just wanted to, let's get back, and I wanted to go into a story about how plants taught me a lesson. So I was recently evicted from a studio under crazy conditions, and I just had to leave the city on that basis. And I had to bring all of my plants with me. And as a plant hoarder, it's a little difficult to move with them safely. So I was experiencing the trauma of eviction, but they experienced that trauma plus being knocked around and having really heavy things fall on them. And it made me feel so, so, so guilty. But on these traumas that they've experienced, none of them died. Despite having looked like they should have, they just shed the leaves that they had because they weren't bad, they just weren't built for the new environment they got into. And they leaked all sorts of things, this white fluid that said, leave me alone, and I did. They started to ooze this beautiful crystalline sap that attracted ants to address any threats or stress that they were having. And even the pieces that broke off of them had roots within days. And I thought to myself, I just have to be more like these plants, out with the old, in with the new. And that leads into my question, how or what is the most valuable lesson that a plant has taught you about yourself or life in general? And thank you.
Thanks, Autumn. Pallavi, would you like to go or would you like me to go?
I can go next.
Okay.
Well, all right, I will just share my screen first and oops, here we go. So I'm going to race through these because there are 4 minutes and 40 slides, so we'll see how. Okay, so last summer I was stuck in where I am. I'm in Williamstown, which is a place where I work, but I don't necessarily live here all the time. And I was away from my family, and I wanted to find a way to locate myself and also like understand where I am outside of just the dominant culture here or the people here, but a way of understanding this place and what it means to me through the entire land. And I also wanted to be useful beyond just donating money to like the thousands of ways in which we could do that, and all the people who needed it. So I wanted my relationship to being useful to be just more than financial. And so there was an empty garden plot in this college because students would garden over it in the summer and they weren't there. And so I had never gardened before. I have like farmed for other people and I've grown meadows, but I had never actually gardened on my own. And so I had a really ambitious and misguided plan of growing enough food for a group of families. And it was now I think about it, it was very foolish, but that's what I thought I would be able to do. And I set out to do it, and I arrived at a very different understanding of what gardening is. But here was my first plan, and I made a different design for every bed and like what would grow in every square foot of the bed. And there were 16 of these beds, which were 12 feet by 4 feet. This is what they look like at the beginning of the season. And they just had these like, small, like in the middle, there's calendula. At the sides, there are like these tiny nasturtiums. There are baby tomatoes here and there. And this is my roommate and friend Ilana, and she helped me dig up all the beds because they had a lot of beautiful plants growing in them for a long time, but not necessarily plants that we would eat or cook with, but a lot of life in them. So I actually don't really like to use the word weed at all because I think it's kind of meaningless. Here's my friend Suzanne. She would help water it. In the beginning, when we transplanted everything, the plants needed water for a lot of water to be able to like latch on to the ground. And it was beautiful to think of like, what does a plant need from me after which it can, you know, I only just have to like not be an obstacle after that point. And it really the plant wants to grow, wants to thrive. We built a little fence around the garden. It was, again, you know, there were so many things which were just like complete like rookie ideas of like, oh, a fence will stop, 3-foot fence would stop a deer, which it doesn't at all, or a 3-foot fence would stop anybody at all that needs to go and wants to eat. And so it was nice to also realize that, yes, I'm growing this garden, there is a part that I'm playing, but the wind and the sun and the water and the soil and all the insects and all the pollinators have are the main gardeners. And so for me to like keep certain creatures out because they are nibbling on something, you know, is a little much. And so this fence was to grow different kinds of beans on it, so that there's a family of groundhogs that lived in the house next door, underneath the house next door, so that at least they could like snack on something and maybe be dissuaded from eating what was inside. And I would say it worked a little bit. This is what it looked like in June, you know, when we're gardening, and the nasturtiums, you can see, have gotten a little bit bigger. The tomatoes are growing bigger and bigger and bigger. The basil is coming out. There's tiny, tiny baby corn right here. We can't even see it just yet. Here it is. My sister visited me and she saw it, and the sunflowers are coming out. These are sunflowers that were like nibbled at by deer in the middle, and then they grew all the way back again. They grew back. It was amazing to see like how much a plant wants to grow and how much a plant wants to be there. I wanted to be there, but so does the plant. These are calendula that were interspersed between the tomato, and these started from a plant that was about 4 inches high with just 4 leaves on it and became this entire section in the middle. Here is Scarlet Emperor pole bean climbing all the way up and then going even higher to about 11 feet and then climbing all the way back down again. And these are the radishes that we planted at the beginning of the season, and what they you know, what they look like in a circle. And what was something that was really lovely was that because I didn't do this before, and I didn't very often like prune anything or pull things out when I had to, a lot of things went into their flowering stage. And then I was able to see for the first time like what something looked like end to end. So rather than considering something only for its small part, or like knowing a leaf only for the leaf that you eat, but not knowing like its own world or what all of its parts are like, or what would happen if you let it do whatever you wanted to do. It happened many times that I was able to see that in this garden. Here are some potatoes, and it was like amazing and also very tender to know that potatoes grow above each other. So the mother potato is at the bottom and all of its children grow above it. Tomato, melon, tomatoes again with a color gradient. Oh, this was an incredible day, many days, where, and this is it's a beautiful relationship that wasps have with tomatoes. And this is a hornworm that loves to eat the tomato plant. And so there's a parasitic wasp that comes and lays eggs on the hornworm, and its larvae eat the worm gradually, slowly, till the worm's body becomes like a gray, like a brown carcass. And then, you know, the wasps fly away, but it also saves the tomato plant. So while I was in the garden, I was able to, you know, witness all of these different lives going around, different interactions, things that I could just view the same way that I enter the garden and observe things, and I'm amazed by it. I know that so many creatures are entering the same space and sort of navigating it in that same way and seeing it in all of these dimensions that I can't even, you know, begin to perceive. And I only see the evidence of them being there in like the small marks that they leave on the leaves. This is, oh, I was happy that day. This is corn again at its like medium, like middling stage. Here it is a little bit taller. After this day, we had like a disastrous day. And I keep saying we because there were many visitors to the garden and many people who helped me grow it. And so it felt like a collective we. And one night, all the corn fell down. There was a huge storm and all the corn fell down. And I was out at 2 a.m. in the morning trying to make the corn stand back up. And then I couldn't do it for all the corn because it became very, very late. And then a few days later, once the sun came out, all the corn stood up on its own. And some of them had a slight bend, but they all stood up again. And it was, again, like a recurring lesson that I could have this idea of myself as a gardener who's making all of these decisions. But what I was just like all of everything that was there was growing so that it can have the same, it has similar aspirations as me, and to like continue itself and to grow more of itself and to see an end to the season, reach the end of that season and produce something to carry on into the next season. Here's that corn harvested. Here's that corn above my grandparents, who were also incredible gardeners, and a visitor, some grass weavings, and all the seeds I got at the end of the season. So for every seed I planted, I received at least 100 more of each of them. And that also was a different way of thinking about what gardening is, when you're gardening for just eating the thing that's growing versus when you're gardening for producing a seed that will see like a flourishing garden the next year. Some tomato drawings from that before, after harvesting. Another drawing of tomatoes after harvest. And then this is the garden at the end of the season. I think I'm like almost done here. So from all of that time, and like realizing the kinds of things that I had studied in school or kind of just knew hypothetically, but to see them actually happen in this kind of multi-dimensional way with sound and with smell and with touch, seeing all of that happen, I really felt that maybe the only work that I really wanted to make anymore was one where that arose from the garden. And so I'm right now, or at least in the months when I cannot garden, I'm thinking and planning a school called Garden School, where all of a child's learning would be based and stem from like the seasons within a garden and what arises from a garden, and not where the garden is a metaphor or kind of like an idea, or sustainability of gardening as an idea, but is the work in itself, and is the mother, and also the fruit of the work. And I will stop sharing right now. There's a link that I want to share, which may not translate really well if I play it back, but it's of the grasses that are flying in the wind in my meadow. And it relates actually to maybe Koli, something you said, and also what you said, Autumn, about plants and how they feel and about love. And I sometimes wonder, like, when plants move in the wind, we can think of the wind as inanimate, and we can sometimes, some people think of plants as inanimate, but I also sort of wonder that a plant is, I can't help but think that a plant is also so, is made and is living in harmony with the wind, and not as me falling on the ground and feeling the ground hit me on my leg, not that way, but the same way that my hand moves this way and there's air moving too, and this is not a necessary gesture, but it feels beautiful to me. And so having that sort of relationship with wind, I mean, I can only imagine, I'm not grass, but I would like you all to see it. All right, thank you. Oh, my question and my quote. My quote actually is a poem I read. It's a very short one, and it's called Elegy. And the poem is, "Who would I show it to?" And I've been thinking about this because of the current humanitarian crisis in India with COVID, and thinking about what we make and what we grow, and how much of what we do that for is keeping in mind another person who's going to see it, and who we can show our work to, and if that person is gone. And so my question is, if especially with you, Koli, Autumn, and Eric, if when you grow plants, is there somebody in mind that you want to show your season's results to, or like share that bounty with?
Thank you so much. And I have a whole notebook here and connections across what connections that I've been thinking about with what Autumn and Pallavi and Koli just expressed. And really that's what we're trying to do in this brief moment of time, is to get some sparks out into space, and to think about how plants and how witnessing plants, I mean, it's so beautiful to listen to you, Pallavi, to talk about how witnessing plants and witnessing processes of growing really make you a better person and make you happy and fulfilled. And you sort of feel that when you go through these images of this project. So we're going to get to more free flow discussion in a sec. I'm just going to share something real briefly. In just before the pandemic, just before the pandemic, I was in Texas at a residency, and I took this photograph in my studio. And the magenta lights that you see above that table, Autumn has 2 of those now. So 2 of the lights that you see on above that table, Autumn has. Those lights are growing. Below those lights, milkweed is growing, which is this plant. And I was growing milkweed to help the Texas state insect, which is the monarch butterfly, who migrate annually from Central America to Canada through Texas. And milkweed, this plant that we see here, is the sole host plant and companion to the monarch. And I basically grew tons of these plants, and like Pallavi, witnessing their qualities and their identities, and learning and growing as a person. And I planted these plants in the 1870s Corsicana Hebrew cemetery, and I planted them in an unused portion. So in the 90s, so this small town had a huge Jewish population, and they had small little merchant shops that kind of like made the town tick. And Walmart moved in, and all of those small Jewish merchants went out of business. So on the left side of the screen here, you see an unused portion of the cemetery that was meant to expand. And that just didn't happen. The Jews left. And if you see there on the bottom left, there's this strip. That's where I planted the milkweed. There's so much more about this particular project, about care and reciprocity and ethics of use and health and healing. And really, in this moment of this project is where and when I started this Seeds of Perpetuity project, this album that is the release tonight. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but I just want to end with a story. So kapok, which is a soft, silky, water-resistant cotton-like material from the kapok tree, was used to fill military bomber jackets in World War II. But the US's supply of kapok was cut off when Japan started controlling Java. So US had a relationship with Java. That's where they got this material. And milkweed floss was the best available substitute for kapok. And during World War II, children were asked to collect and plant milkweed. And guess what happened during this time? The monarch butterfly thrived because their host plant, the milkweed, entered into the military industrial complex. So I like this particular story because it thinks through biopolitics and how plants sort of are connected to these other big institutions and systems. Okay, my quote by Anna Singh from The Mushroom at the End of the World is, quote, "Collaboration means working across difference, which leads to contamination. Without collaboration, we all die," end quote. And then my question is, what stories do seeds hold? And how do these stories inspire our critical creative process? And so maybe we can go a little bit over time and get into a nice 20-minute conversation here. But what do we do? How do we talk now? I mean, there are so many key words that were brought up: future, Zoocratic, thinking about taxonomy of names and naming and symbiosis and relationships and witnessing and thinking, growing and being in the garden, thinking about multi dimensions and all of these sort of different sensorial experiences that we have. But maybe we should talk about this. Like, I love this this image that you showed, Pallavi, of the little kid potatoes growing above the parents. And maybe you could talk about like witnessing and how that sort of has played into these drawings that you've started sort of conceptualizing that tell the story of the seed school.
I feel embarrassed talking for longer. I think I spoke for too long, but I'll say it.
You could pass that. We can let that question sit, and then you could pass it along in some way. Filter the question and then move it.
Maybe I'll filter it quietly.
Okay.
Eric, you were you said kind of like your question and your quote made me think a little bit. Like I just thought of like like the importance of seeds, that like they're kind of like how important they are considered to our lives. I think it's like pretty evident in the Svalbard seed vault.
Yeah.
You know, the Svalbard seed vault, as people probably know, is this like kind of massive vault built in the far beyond the Arctic Circle, where it's freezing all the time, dug deep into the ground, where all sorts of seeds, but I think mainly seeds for plants that we need for our survival, are stored. And in the case of some super post-apocalyptic event, like people are supposed to travel there to be able to reseed the earth, kind of. And it had never occurred to me, but we have the seed vault, you know, and we see this importance of plants. But we don't have, like, as far as I know, we don't have like a post-apocalyptic sperm and egg bank for animals, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of like underlines a little bit like the incredible importance that seeds have, and our perceived value for our survival.
Speaking of like going off of like several questions at once and going into like, we don't have zygotes ready to go in an apocalyptic situation, I was thinking the question, what stories do seeds hold, make me think of the epigenetic process of just living that everything goes through, like plants, animals, primates of all sorts, all up and down the food chain. It's like every seed or every reproductive cell that we create has the story of the life that had been lived before it, and the life before that, and before that, and it switches on and off cells based on how that life was lived. So if a plant that usually is a shady plant kind of survived in a very sunny environment, it might turn off its like having dark leaves trait, or like some people have like brown eyes, but they move to a place where it's a little bit dark all the time, like super, super northward. So a recessive trait moves in and it's like, oh, your eyes are lighter now. So it can let more light in so it doesn't seem as dark, et cetera, et cetera. And it also makes you think of Pallavi's question, when you grow plants, who do you think of? And I think that's kind of it. I think of who that plant came from, because I get all of my plants as cuttings from people trading. So I'm like, oh, this is so-and-so's mother's plant who was passed down from someone else's mother and their friend, and it has such a story, and it can survive in so many houses under so many different caretakers. That's my comment there.
Yeah, and I don't know. I also have been thinking about this question of what, when you grow a plant, are you thinking of someone or something or some kind of larger system? And when I was growing milkweed, I was spending a lot of time in the Hebrew cemetery talking to a person who was one of the last Jews in this town. And I was able to make all of these connections between Jewish diaspora and the monarch butterfly, and also thinking about their host plant, the milkweed, and specifically thinking about resilience and assimilation. And I feel like that connects to what you were talking about, Autumn, about having to leave your studio all of a sudden, and having to adapt into a new space, but also you're also trying to care for your plants and making sure that they need what they need so that they can also adapt.
I'll have to show pictures of the survivors soon.
So there's other questions too. I mean, there's so much to talk about. It's kind of crazy that, like, I mean, that's the thing that is so inspiring to me. It's like you start thinking about plants and growth and human, non-human interactions, and it sort of puts you on all of these sort of paths. I'm thinking about what you were saying, Coley, about Iceland as this country around the 40s. All of a sudden Denmark is annexed by Germany, and they have to sort of have sovereignty and figure out national identity, and thinking about how that connects to ways of thinking about the land is really interesting. And also thinking about how in Iceland, like, the trees were just cut down to use for fuel and different like basic necessity stuff, and now there are just no trees there. And thinking about how that country has sort of like rebuilt their tree stock is also a really interesting.
Yeah, I also think, like, kind of sometimes I think it's so interesting, like, obviously tourism is a huge thing over there, and people travel there to experience the otherworldly landscapes, but they don't stop to think about that, like, all these desert landscapes that are there are mainly there because of humans. They're not, like, depending on how you define natural, the plants don't grow in the highlands because they are the sheep are put to the highlands to graze, and apparently it used to be forested. So I think it's super interesting, like, with regards, to like identity and aesthetics and stuff like this. Like, there's no trees there now, but it's kind of like, it's a human thing that there are no trees, but people romanticize it because they think it's a natural thing. And it's it's interesting.
There's a fun little story here, which is the first forester, and maybe I'm getting the story a little bit incorrect, but I know that this happened, but you probably know. The first forester in Iceland, like the first person who had like he was the head of forestry. He was like, we need to fix the soil. And so he was trying to find a seed that could, or a plant that could help rejuvenate and bring oxygen into the soil so that they could start planting trees. And he went to Alaska, and he learned about the Alaskan lupin, and the climates are similar. So he planted some and figured out that, oh, the lupin, it really fixes the soil. And so in the 70s, there was this big program to bring lupin from Alaska and throw it around Iceland. And now in the summer, like you could see these sort of massive fields of lupin that are just sort of, you know, going wild, which is beautiful. And it's kind of divided the country. On the one hand, people know that it's helping rejuvenate the soil. On the other hand, this whole conversation about invasive comes up.
Yeah, exactly. My grandparents were gardeners, and they hated the lupin with a passion. We would be driving around the country, and they would point out to these beautiful purple fields, and they would like literally like shake their fist at it. I really hate it. But there's also another interesting story with regards to like invasive species. It's like a kind of a story from my youth, and a lot of people where I come from will kind of relate to it, because we have a program there where teenagers are put to work. It's sort of like a child labor program that everybody does in the summer, and they get like a little pocket money because of it. But mainly you're doing jobs like picking weeds, as you call them in the English language. In the Icelandic language, like they are literally called evil grass, illgresi, you know. And so you get put.
What is the word?
Evil illgresi. It literally translates to like evil grass. But those are weeds. But the weeds that you get sent out to pick, like for the whole duration of summer, is mainly clover. Clover in flower beds, and like everywhere you're supposed to pick the clover. And then I started reading about the clover, and it's so interesting. Like the clover is a weed, but the clover is only recently a weed, because before they used to sell grass seeds and clover seeds together, because they would make the grass more beautiful. And people would throw the seeds everywhere and to grow a lawn. That's a whole nother discussion, like what are lawns and why do they exist? That's also interesting. But anyway, in the past, it was considered very desirable to have a lot of clover, because it's very green and it's very soft. So for a lawn, clover was very desirable. But then there was an American company that developed a chemical as a pesticide. And this chemical killed the clover, but the grass survived, and they didn't know really how to market it. So they started marketing it as a weed killer, and basically started selling it to kill clover, and started to market clover as weed. And, you know, still to this day, this is creating teenager child labor in Iceland. This marketing campaign where like all the teenagers are like sitting in the flower beds all summer long, picking these weeds. It's kind of funny.
Actually, related to that, and thinking about invasive species, or like the idea of that, or and also parasite. I feel like as some of the greatest parasites, that being one of them, I really feel that I feel really strangely, I think, about what we call invasive or not. I mean, there are some things that seem like very objectively so, but then also, you know, I think about like where I am versus where I was born, and my movement, and also maybe an assumption for people to be creatures that can sprawl all over, whereas plants should kind of stay where they are. However, they can maybe over several hundred years move, and then that would be, because I was thinking about, like, you know, in Indian cuisine, there are so many things that are, I was so surprised to know that, considering how many tomatoes I eat and how many potatoes I are, like, like the pillars of North Indian cuisine, that we didn't even have that until a few hundred years ago. And I don't know what we ate before that. And so like what becomes like naturalized, lawns particularly, I think lawns are an abomination, and lawnmowers also. But I do, yeah, I do wonder how we, I mean, it's something I feel like I don't have a very strong opinion one way or the other, because it seems that I guess maybe to make any statement about plants broadly is akin to making any statement about like people broadly or any. So I think last year seeing what was happening really, I think, helped me see that, like, yeah, plant by plant, and specific plant by plant, not even its family, that very plant, I think that revealed much more about how well it, according to me, how well it behaves with another thing, according to like my idea of what this garden should be like, and how much of that kind of how much of how we evaluate whether something's invasive or not is based on even our own lifespan, and how what we want to see within our lifespan of, let's say average 75 years or 70 years, and in that how something transforms a landscape, and whether then seems like, oh, this shouldn't be here versus this should be here. Is it undoing the work of 1,000 years? Is it undoing the work of 10 years? Is it only undoing my seasons gardening, And I think that's also like our perspective, using our perspective, but to then use it to like call out, like, or to create grander truths, I think is such a human thing. But yeah, I don't know where I stand at all on that.
That the definition of weeds part really stood out to me, because it hit me so hard when I really looked it up, like back in 2019. Because before you're like, oh, I know what a weed is, blah, blah, blah. But when you see that the definition is a plant that's not valued where it's growing and is of vigorous growth, it really makes you think of like, does this kind of echo what redlining is? Or like, does this really echo how predominantly white institutions deal with people of color, where like they can't deal with, or they don't know how to work around or work with, so they try to expel and suspend and omit. So yeah, I feel I very, very much agree that the idea of a weed and the idea of a noxious plant needs to be redefined. 100%.
I mean, today I was reading this essay by Robin Wall Kimmerer about gift economy. I think I sent it to you all. And it's kind of like, she's a writer and a thinker and a biologist and a person who witnesses and makes these connections between these non-human things and how they sort of connect to human expression and ways of living and how we identify ourselves in the world. But I really love this idea of gift economy. And I just want to read this. I'll do it slowly. I just want to read this quote because I think it's really beautiful and it connects to a lot of the things that we've been saying. She says, "In naming the plants who shower us with goodness, we recognize that these are gifts from our plant relatives, manifestations of their generosity, care, and creativity. When we speak of these not as things or products or commodities, but as gifts, the whole relationship changes." So I love this idea. I mean, part of the whole thing about invasive species is that, like you said, Autumn, it's a way for oppressors to keep oppressing, keep controlling. She goes on to say, "In the presence of such gifts, gratitude is the intuitive first response. Gratitude is so much more than a polite thank you. It is the thread that connects us in deep relationship. And of course, this is something that you can sort of feel in Pallavi's work, that there's a relationship here going on. And she goes on to say, if our first response is gratitude, then our second is reciprocity, to give a gift in return. What could I give these plants in return for the generosity? It could be a direct response like weeding or water or a song or a gesture of thanks that sends appreciation out on the wind, or indirect, like donating to my local land trust so that more habitat for the gift givers will be saved, or making art that invites others into this web of reciprocity. So I really love this idea that like we can care for plants and we can be around plants and we can witness plants and we can grow with them in tandem. And there's so many different levels of reciprocity that we can engage in. And one of those is making art and making expression about witnessing and how these plants and seeds inspire us. So I just wanted to toss that out there. Robin Wall Kimmerer, wow.
Another one is planting a cover crop so that the soil gets regenerated. That's a huge gift to future plants.
What is a cover crop?
Now, cover crop is any kind of, I guess sometimes it's a monoculture, but sometimes it's a mixture of seeds that you plant. Like once you're done, you know, farming or gardening, you're done for the season. Towards the end, or even sometimes during, on kind of a arable land, you sow any one or two crops that that then add back to the soil nutrients that could be lost from the time that plants were in it, so that instead of just so it enriches the soil, and you can just turn it over. Sometimes you can just turn it over and plant the next set of plants in it, and then your soil is richer for it. So it's like a green compost for the plants.
The lupin in Iceland was used as a cover crop.
Okay.
It's like literally so it covers the ground.
I think in the US, the predominant one used to be alfalfa, but now they just spray everything with not pesticides, with you know, nitrogen and whatnot.
We're kind of running out of time here. We were supposed to stop at 9. You know, people are still with us. Great. I'm having fun. But we do have to end sort of soon. But what about this quote from Reddit? Like, maybe plants are farming us. Like, I mean, I think that, you know, I like these kinds of moments where you're sort of put in your place. Oh, yeah, never mind. But like, you know what I mean? Like when this person said this and you recited this question or this quote, Coley, it kind of stopped me in my seat. And I started thinking about time. And that like maybe there is this sort of, I know this is gonna sound like stupid, but like maybe they are using us and we're just here for the moment, just like doing shit so we can all die and then they can kind of continue doing their thing.
Yeah, I mean, some plants live really long. So from their perspective, they just see us come and go, you know, and turn into nutrition in very quick cycles, probably. So maybe, but they are giving us oxygen, you know, they are growing us in that sort of way, which I think is like, it comes back to what Autumn was talking about with, there is a symbiosis, obviously, with the plants, you know, they give us many things, but some of the things they give us, yeah, I don't know, they give us oxygen and they give us, of course, a lot of food. But they also get something.
I feel like this comment kind of like also puts a lot of like uh the worst of our traits onto other creatures. And I mean, I think that I mean, just because we don't know whether something can feel something or not, it's not to say that they cannot, or that eliminates that possibility. But I think that I think even in terms of like the amount of just like mass of things on this world, we are not even the greatest of muscle, like in terms of percentage of how much. So what about all the other creatures? I mean, our plants taking advantage of all the ants in the world and all the mushrooms, or so I think that maybe this comment is more kind of revealing of this kind of like tables turning thing, assuming that there is more than one species that views the world as what you use rather than what you have a deep relationship with, which I'm hoping is limited to just us, because it would be so sad if there are more than us who feel that the world is to be mined for our civilizations. But there's actually a comment. Mushrooms are fun. I feel like this is kind of along the lines of people who are afraid of the singularity, or like are afraid of some like doomsday, instead of like the joyous relationship that we have with the living world. But like there's some kind of like either we conquer them or they conquer us, like that kind of thinking that it has to be a kingdom with a king that conquers. And that is how we can imagine the world. So if not us, it has to be the other way around. Whereas I think that there are other realities that are possible and other ways of
Yeah.
sharing our time.
And it goes back to what Autumn was talking about, and how, researching relationships between plants has sort of played into the way that they're thinking about narrative in paintings and the relationships that sort of come through in the paintings. Yeah. And how it's a relationship and not somebody up here and somebody else down here. Of course that the relationship can have some kind of power dynamic related to it, but
yeah, it's like it's coming at it from a few different angles, but it's almost, for lack of a better word, existential, where you're not saying, oh, this is feeding off this and it's using et cetera, et cetera. You're just like, this is as real as I am and possibly realer. And going off of Pallavi's statement, with the singularity, the things that you are around and the people you talk to, you can't really know you can't really know who and what is or is not conscious. So you can say, oh, a plant doesn't have personhood, or a body of water doesn't have personhood, but then the day that a body of water is given personhood, it makes you recontextualize everything. I think it happened in New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken.
What happened in New Zealand?
There was one specific body of water that was essential to the First Nations peoples there, and I believe like 4 or 5 years ago, I need to get the exact name, the country declared it a person. So that body of water, I believe it has female pronouns, and she is now seen as a person, internationally recognized, which is beautiful.
Hi, all. I came back on here. I really love that, Autumn. Thank you for sharing that. I know we still have a few people watching, but I do think maybe it might be time to wrap up. Eric, what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're in charge.
I'm in charge. That's true.
But I just want to end with a quote by Robin Wall Kimmerer about gift economy. She says, quote, "The currency in a gift economy is relationship, which is expressed as gratitude, as interdependence, and as the ongoing cycles of reciprocity.
That was a good way to end. I want to thank you all for your time tonight and all of your insight and all of your sharing. This was super fun. I was thinking about like all the things that I want to do in my own garden this summer. So I really appreciate it. And we have been sharing links throughout the night on the YouTube. So those are all there, links to the album as well. So everyone can put that on after this is over and just listen to it, play it to your plants. My plants are going to get it in a little bit.
And ever.
Forever and ever and ever.
Never ending.
Yeah. And then I just want to, thank all of our viewers and all of our sponsors, of course, that sponsor Bemis, especially the Mellon Foundation, which is our primary sponsor for Low End. They are the ones that keep everything free. So thank you all for that. And please don't forget to follow us and enjoy more programming that we're doing. And thank you all for being here tonight. Super fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I will see you
Okay.
all soon, hopefully.
Yes. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Have a
Good
good
night.